Hello, I'm Sherilyn Sunflower, staying at the Bosque Village in Michoacan, Mexico. And currently I'm living in a building called Extasis. And today I am going to fill in some holes with a mixture of glue and sawdust. I have already done some using wood to cover up some holes like at the bottom of the door where a lizard could fit through. And there's still quite a few spaces in Extasis, and I'll try to show you now. You can kind of tell with the light coming in because it's daylight now, and give you an idea of what I'm going to be doing today. So you can see there's some cracks here that have a lot of light coming in, and some are worse than others. On the door in particular, which is what I've been focusing on, as soon as I close the door, you can kind of see at the very bottom there are some pretty major holes, and I'm going to fill those today with that mixture that I talked about. I have done this one other time with this particular mixture. Last week we filled in some holes at the solar dehydrator, and it worked really, really well. So it was a smaller project, and I just wanted to get started to learn how, like the consistency and everything. This particular building warms up pretty good in the daytime, and so I'm trying to do it earlier in the day before it gets warm, and then hopefully the warmth will dry it out before I sleep in here tonight. But the glue I'm using is not very stinky. It's just a basic white glue. So okay, so I'm getting my glue mixture ready. The Bosque gets sawdust from a local sawmill with like just taking bags down in the van and filling them with sawdust. So I grabbed some of the sawdust out of one of those bags, and I'm breaking it up so that there's not any chunks or pieces. Sometimes there's like pieces of wood in the sawdust, so we'd want to remove that. I wanted it pretty clean, so I took it out of a bag instead of out of a bucket where it might have had spiders living in it or something. There's a lot of critters here. And then I have shaken up this big bucket of glue, and it has a really nice screw lid here. So that makes it kind of easy. And I'm doing small batches because I fear that it might, dry out pretty quickly, and I am not very fast at this. So I want to start with less, and I'll just remix the batches over and over. So I have glue and sawdust. It's quite windy out here right now. Maybe not the best time to do this, but I'm using a, it's not a spatula. Can't think of the name of this tool right now. I'm going to get laughed at for this. And just mixing it in and adding a little bit at a time so that I don't get too much glue on there. I don't want it to be too wet. There's kind of a perfect consistency I found last time that was thin enough to press into the holes well, but not so thin that it's runny. I don't want it to run out. I want it to stay where I put it. So blending. You can kind of see there. I'm using an old bowl that was kind of dirty already, and just mixing it in. Mixing. And then I just keep adding a little bit more and blending it as much as I can. And this is still quite dry, so I'm going to add some more. warm sunny day here in Michoacan, which is pretty typical. Kind of near Aranga. Getting closer now. It's a little bit softer. I'm going to add one more glob of glue to this so it softens it up just a little bit more, but not runny. And I'm going to put the lid back on so we don't dry out the glue till I do my next batch. But I think that's going to be sufficient for this round. I'm going to start with the door and then work my way over to the wall that's not cobbed. I think cobbed is the right word. Three walls in Extasis are pretty solid, and it used to be actually open on the far wall where I showed those holes, and after the building was built and used for a little while, it was actually an extra wall was put in, and it's yet to be, I mean, it has windows and then shelves, but it's not insulated. So this will just provide a little bit more insulation. It's really windy here sometimes, and I'm amazed at night how I can feel it's really drafty inside Extasis sometimes. When I covered the bottom of the door with a piece of wood, it helped a lot because it was a really big space between the door and the door jamb. What's happened is the door has warped a little bit, so it doesn't fit the frame like it used to when it was originally built. So this is just kind of trying to fill in some of those spaces. So this is actually a really nice consistency. I don't know how well you can see that in the video, but yeah, that's what I'm going to work with. Okay, so now I'm back inside, and I'm going to start work on the door here with this mixture. And I put the mixture on one side so that I can use pressure to push it through but not make a huge mess. So here's a really big hole, and I'm just going to press it in there. This might be too far away to see. And I'm going to actually, you know, the door's fairly thick, so I'm going to just keep adding a bit and get all the way to the very bottom so there's no wind or little lizards, which is what mostly I find in Extasis, is little lizards like this house a lot. I like it a lot because of where it's situated. Usually during the day, I'm not in here. So when it's really warm, I'm not in the building, but in the mornings and in the evenings, it's quite comfortable. In the mornings, the sun comes in the window, and so I get the sunrise, and in the evening, I could open this door, and when it starts to cool down in the day, it is really, really comfortable in here when I'm in here. Now, some of these have been, you know, like this seam has been covered, and clearly somebody has done glue over the years, like I'm doing, but it's either dried out and cracked, or you know, the wood has split and cracked. But like this particular one, there's still wood here, but the wood has cracked, so I'm filling in that hole. And I might go ahead and check it on the other side just to make sure that it's filled in enough. So you can see I just press and push at the same time. And it's really nice during the day because you can see the light and where those holes are. And I'm trying to be conscious about taking off whatever excess, because we certainly don't want a lot of extra there. But that is how we fill holes with glue and sawdust. Okay, so I've done the door and part of the far wall, and I'm ready to do another round. I found at the end of that it was a little tricky. The mixture started to dry out a little bit, so harder to get a smooth finish. It's a pretty rustic building, but I'd still like it to be, you know, as reasonably nice as possible. So I'm going to do maybe a little bit less of the sawdust in my bowl and mix up another batch to finish that wall. I had to do a little bit of nailing as well because so a lot of the spaces have been shimmed up over the years, or potentially, you know, were shimmed when the wall went in or original construction. But the shims are coming out in some places, so I had to nail. Some of them didn't have nails that were long enough to hold them. So I did a little bit of nailing of shims back into place so that I wouldn't have to use quite so much glue. You know, don't want to be wasteful on the supplies that we have. And there's lots of shims, a shim being like a stick that fills in a little bit of space. Sometimes it's for tightening, but this is just for filling space. I feel like the door is pretty good. There's still spaces between the door jamb and the door, so I'll work at doing some shims for that. I don't have the proper size for that area, but I have my putty knife, I remember the name, and I'm mixing up the glue in the sawdust again with just a little bit less, so that hopefully I might add a little more glue this time as well, so it stays. I'm not sure. I'm learning through this whole process, but already huge improvement. Much less light through the window, and I'll take the camera in and kind of show a little bit of what I've done there. It's harder to see on the door, just the way the light is, I think, right now. Yeah, so mixing in, it's kind of like an Elmer's glue that's being used. There's like hardly any stink at all from it, so it's not a very toxic thing that I'm using. And I want to scrape all the way to the bottom of the bowl because there's some dry sawdust down there. Not sure the best angle for this. Learning how to do video as well as learning a bunch of other stuff as well. Kudos, shout out to my dad, who is no longer with us on this planet, but when I was young growing up, we did a lot of projects together. I would spend weekends with him, and he would save, I used to say that he saved the projects probably because weekends when he had time to do the projects, but we did all kinds of home improvement stuff together, and I love doing those things. You know, we tiled stuff and rotated tires and all that kind of stuff. So it's really sweet that this is not intimidating in any way. I feel quite confident to take on a project without a mentor. Just being told this is what you use, this is how you do it. And hopefully this video will be helpful for somebody else maybe who also doesn't have a mentor. Again, I'm putting the lid back on the glue so it doesn't dry out while I'm working on the next section. And it's looking nice and soft and pasty. And I will be headed back in. I'm kind of trying to keep the glue bucket out of the sun as well. It's going to start warming up pretty quickly in the building, so I hope to be done maybe after this round. But I will take the camera in and try to show the spaces that I have done inside. Let's see if I can do this without too much trouble. So put that down. So up here on what I'm using as a bookshelf, there were lots of light coming up here, and that's all filled in. I am assuming that I might have to come back again because this glue shrinks as it dries. So potentially I'll have to come back again, but I'm doing like up here, this is where this shim was practically on the outside of the building. Just didn't have a long enough screw in it to hold it in place, like maybe 1/4 of an inch in the wood. So I got a screw that was another like 1/2 inch longer, and I didn't split it, even though it's a very small shim. So it's this one right here that I nailed in. And now I'm going to start, there's also a lot of bookshelves that I haven't cleared yet down here, but you can see there's still quite a bit of light going on. And this is, in the past, already had the same material. So I can't remember how many years this building has been here, but it's just worn. So I'm like refilling places that weren't holes originally after construction probably. And but you can see that there's a lot of separate pieces to this wall that's been added over to, you know, not when the building was originally built. But yeah, I'm going to keep at it. So I'm not sure the light is good enough down here to see exactly the details of what I'm doing, but I'm just picking up a little bit of glue on the putty knife and pressing it in to the wall and keeping the camera far enough away to see the details of what I'm doing, or the larger scale of it. You can't really see the detail as much, but this wall has quite a bit of glue from before, so harder to get a smooth finish. But I'm just going to the wall and pressing and pulling down with the putty knife. And I'm going to do that on all of these cracks here. I don't think you see the light as well from the angle that the camera is right now, but every seam essentially has glue that has shrunk, or, you know, potentially critters or whatever have affected it. Probably shrinkage is the key for most of this on this particular area. Some of the areas just haven't been done at all, like on the door, because it wasn't necessary when the door had a good seal. But now that the door has warped a little bit, the seal is no longer good. And you know, it's amazing how many little critters live around here. I haven't seen many spiders in here. This trip I have seen scorpions in the lodge, and a lot of spiders in a lot of different places. But luckily for me, they don't care for this building so much right now. I'm not sure if it's because it gets so warm. But yeah, I'd rather not live with too many spiders. I have seen lizards in here this year. So as I'm doing this as well, some of the dry stuff is coming off from previous times, and I'm just incorporating it in with the glue and putting it back on. Trying to get a thin swipe on the putty knife so that I'm not wasting it or having it fall off too much. And trying to incorporate the past glue putty situation as much as possible so I'm not tearing it off, but actually utilizing what's already there. And thin little swipes is what seems to work pretty good on this. I think you can see what I'm doing. And when I do drip and it hits the bottom, I'm finding the putty knife just picks it up pretty well, and it's not super messy. Like, I have gloves on my hands just so I don't have to wash them too much, but it's really not that bad. I'm gonna wipe some dry stuff off this bottom part here. I do see light in the corner, so I'm gonna grab that, smush it in there. It's amazing. I don't really have mouse problems here because I don't have a lot of food in this building. And what I do have is in a pretty well sealed container. Like, I have a tin that I brought especially to put food in this building with me, snacks or whatever. But lizards, it's amazing how, like a mouse, it doesn't, they can fit through a really small space. Maybe not as small as these ones right here on the wall, but I've certainly puttied up some pretty large spaces already today that a lizard could certainly fit through. Like, I'm seeing at the top here, I don't know, maybe it's 1/4 of an inch of space, and you can't really see it very well. But anyways, lizards can fit through small spaces. There's big lizards that wouldn't fit, but there's little tiny lizards and they fit. They're cute, but I'd rather them be outside.